My book coming out soon is called Good Faith Politics, and I kind of wanted to start a conversation about um, one of my favorite sections of the book called The Honorable Machiavellian, and it's in the chapter Welcome to the Jungle. And Machiavellian, Machiavellianism is a term that refers to one of the dark triad personality traits of like psychopathy, again, Machiavellianism. But I'm not sure that the third one is like narcissism or something else.
Cynicism or
But yeah, so it's a term, but it's based on an actual person, Niccolo Machiavelli. He was an Italian
absolutely.
statesman um, who wrote about his most famous book was called The Prince, and it was a book about how to be the ideal leader. And what made it so popular was its emphasis and unabashedly honest take on an amoral um, perspective towards leadership, and then like amoral, not being immoral. And it's not like about being pure evil. I think a lot of people, they may think that, oh well, you think psychopathy and Machiavelli, you think evil. It's not evil. It's just not bound by morality, and it's
Right.
very transactional, and it's a lot about power and remaining in power, and that's the whole point of the book. It's like, hey, if you want to be, and then this goal is for like leaders, like this is because he's been around in his career, he had been around leaders of nations and been been like in the room when they had wars and conflicts and stuff, and he was like, I have this experience that very few people have, and I know what makes a leader successful and not successful. um, so he wanted to kind of write his book The Prince to share that. So yeah, so we covered Machiavellianism, and it's an amoral philosophy. And in my book, I have the section is titled "The Honorable Machiavellian," um, because, and then that's supposedly an oxymoron, right? Because Machiavellians aren't supposed to really care about honor. But my point about it is that even though his book is incredibly dark and it's amoral, and when you hear the term Machiavellianism, you want to run from it the same way that you want to run from something like psychopathy. Just because it's not tasteful doesn't mean it's not effective. And just because normal people are turned off by Machiavellianism doesn't mean that there aren't Machiavellian people and leaders in the world. And the reason I say the honorable Machiavellian is when you are dealing with someone who is amoral, who is, a Machiavellian actor, then understanding Machiavellianism is going to be useful, right? Like, thinking in terms of norms and rules and best practices when you're dealing with someone who's just thinking about power and how can you stop me, right? Like, you're going to be at a disadvantage unless you really look at the world in the same cold, calculated way they do in order to kind of predict their moves and understand that if you're playing a clean game against someone who's playing dirty, the advantage is to the person that's playing dirty. And so it's like the honorable Machiavellian is like it's having the ability to see the world through that very cynical and amoral lens that may make a normal person uncomfortable, but to do that in a way to give you insight into the reality of the situation where you are dealing with someone um, who is hostile. And this is something that I know you say a lot, is like it's the Wild West. Like there's systems and there's laws and everything, and those exist, but at the end of the day, there is force, and there are bad actors, and there's nuclear weapons, and there's armies, and those real things can come in and shake up your your belief in those systems.
Absolutely, they can. And it's when I my first thought of Machiavelli again always refers to pot. That's always my first thought process when I hear Machiavelli, and then uh, And then I also think about like the general stereotypes around Machiavelli, just cynicism, self-interested, uh, getting ahead by any means. But I understand your perspective, as in there is value in understanding the reality of the world and knowing if people are playing by a different set of rules and the results of that. I think it should be known, especially to an individual that's either trying to do good in the world or at least is just trying to navigate their way through it. Um, so I definitely understand it. Is Machiavelli generally, for most people, he leaves a bad taste in their mouth. Um, and you know what? Like when I think about Machiavelli, I think there's one part of it where it kind of ties into capitalism to me, where I think people don't like Machiavelli, but he gets it right that we're self-interested,
Yes.
and you can even see that in capitalism. And it's just like, and then it's just like how do you tie the two together? It's just like I'm not necessarily tying them together, but like it's interesting to me when I think about how capitalism equates with or gets right the incentives for being self-interested. It gets that right. And that would be, to me, it would likely be an economic system that Machiavelli would approve of, where you have winners and losers. And it's an interesting concept to me that I was thinking about when I thought about it. But that's it. I certainly agree with what you were saying in terms of there's value to be extracted in just in terms of just merely understanding what is.
No, it's a great connection there between Machiavellianism and capitalism. That is a very astute recognition, because that there is a lot of overlap, right? Because like capitalism, the good thing about socialism is it can give you the warm fuzzies. It's like, oh,
Right.
everybody's equal and work together and communal ownership of resources, sharing is caring. It feels good, right? Capitalism does not feel good, right?
And it doesn't.
There's no illusion that anybody cares about you at all, right? And
Nope.
that's kind of like the whole point of, because Adam Smith is like the founder of capitalism, at least the theory behind it, with the Wealth of Nations. It's like, there's an invisible hand, with what he says, that guides the economy towards something that's good for everybody, which is self-interest. As long as we're all self-interested and there's a free market, then there's going to be rewards given to those who can provide a good service at a low price. And even though, everybody's strictly greedy and self-interested, it works out,
Right.
because they're able to use their ingenuity to create a product that is in their interest. And it's in our interest that they make good products. So
Right.
yeah, it's the same thing. It's like, you can not like capitalism, you could want the warm fuzzies, but history tells you capitalism works. And
Right.
likewise, Machiavellianism, you may not want to hear it,
Right.
but does that mean that he's wrong?
Right.
No.
Absolutely. 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 That's exactly how I thought about it. And I didn't want to tie it there, but then when I started thinking about it, I'm like, that it fits. Like
Right.
it fits, and it's uncomfortable, but I think it's a way of putting that perspective out there, that like some things that you may think is like, or some things that you may think leave a bad taste in your mouth, you have to think about how often it's put into application, into reality. And it's just like a lot of times when your ideologies confront you in the face, it's different than how you think about it. uh, and that's where I think it's interesting, where if people could really, like, you know what, if you're a capitalist, you may have more in common with Machiavelli than you think. It's like,
Yeah. And so here's one of the things I think that I think about me that gives me a unique insight here, is that there's a and not a lot, very few people know me personally. You're one of the few that knows me personally.
absolutely.
There's a coldness inside of me, right?
Yep.
There's a coldness there
For
that,
evil though.
what was that?
I said for evil though, I would say, or for bad.
Oh, yeah, coldness for bad people, yes. But just generally speaking, there's like a little bit. Like, I'm not a psychopath or anything, but there's a little bit of coldness that allows me to, like, I can see the evil villain side of problems, right? Like a lot of people, like they
Right.
stay in just like normal person land,
Right.
where like we have these norms and like you don't break the norms, and part of that maybe just be intellectual creativity, the fact that I'm willing to be like, hey, we always do it this way, but what if you did it a different way, right? That's kind of an entrepreneurial
Mm.
thing or just a creative person thing. But like being willing to just say, like Machiavelli say, hey, those norms you got, forget them, right? Like,
Yep.
what can I do and what's the path to power? I think like that a lot. Now, I don't act like that, right? Because I'm very principled, but I still see it. Like I see those angles. So one of the parts when I'm talking about Machiavellianism is I call it it's a section on superior force. And I give an analogy. I say, okay, so imagine your CEO, the CEO of your company, is given some sort of speech, and you're in the building. Who's the boss? It's like the CEO's the boss, right? Like he's here, he has the power to fire everybody, promote people. He's more powerful than anybody except the board of directors. So he's the boss. But if you walk up to the CEO and you put a knife to his neck,
Who
now
got the
who's the
most power?
boss?
Yep.
Yeah, now who's the boss? You're the boss, right?
Yep.
You're the boss
Absolutely.
until you're met with the superior force.
Absolutely.
That's just how it, like now most people don't think that way. They don't think like, oh, I could be the man for the next X minutes until the police get here or whatever, some superior force. And this gets back to the this kind of goes to the military, right? Like because at the end of the day, you could have whatever corporate hierarchy, you could have laws, you could have whatever you want to have. But if I got this knife to your neck, none of that matters, right?
Yep.
And
That's why doing
and
business in Africa is bad. Yes.
that's unfortunately that's why doing business in Africa is bad because United States is not going to go to war to save your business. And if
Absolutely.
there's corruption in the government and they steal your land or your building or whatever, you're there's nothing you can do about that. So
Nope.
that's what I call basically, I, the whole point. One of the biggest points when me talking about Machiavellianism is the idea that civilization is a game, and the reality is that we're in a jungle, and that's why it's called Welcome to the Jungle. Right? The real world, the true real world, is Machiavellian. That's the truth. In the jungle, a threat in the jungle supersedes anything else, right? Like you could have whatever rules and laws and whatever agreements and culture you want to have. When force enters the picture, you're either strong enough to defeat it or you're not.
Right.
Right? It's that simple, right? So the realist reality is the Machiavellian reality.
Absolutely.
It is the realist reality. And the thing is, people don't think about that. Like we assume we're protected. We assume folks are civilized. We assume that we're not going to get invaded by, at least in the United States, we happen to be pretty strong, right? But if we were, you say Ukraine, right? And all of a
Right.
sudden, Putin comes in, it's like, well, whatever laws, whatever borders you thought you had, don't matter anymore, right? And
Yep.
now you're in a Machiavellian struggle, and it's just a matter of are you strong enough to defend against the aggressor? And so my point is civilization, which is everything good about humanity, isn't real, right? That or at least it's less real than the Machiavellian, level underneath it.
Right.
And what that means is civilization is sacred and it needs to be protected. And we need to stay playing this civilization game as much and as long as we can. But you got to look out for threats in the jungle still. You got to see who's trying to look like they're playing the civilization game with us, but sneakily making moves to come after us while we're sleeping in the jungle. So
Yep.
yeah, it's that just thinking about force and like how and so the Machiavellians is thinking about, oh, what should I do? What are the norms? What are the practice? What's against the rules? It's thinking, what can you do to stop me?
Right.
It's that simple. Like I don't care what the law is. Can you stop me? And when you have someone who's thinking like that, you got to really recognize what you're dealing with because that person is dangerous in a way
Absolutely.
that almost nobody else is.
Absolutely. And that requires a not necessarily the same level of danger, but just like you said, it requires at least attention and the consciousness of the enemy in that regard. Because it's like if you're dealing with somebody who's self-interested, they will go at any lengths, especially if they got the power. It's just like, what can you do against it? It's just like, and if you're playing by the rules, then you're disadvantaged, and that's where it
Right,
puts you at an
and you just
inch.
lose.
Right, and
You just
that's where
lose
it
in them,
puts
and you
you
lose in the jungle.
right.
It's over.
It's it, and that's where you almost have to become a monster when you're dealing with somebody like that, or you have to find a way to group up and remove whatever virus or infection that would be to the system, and hopefully that there's enough people in mass that would group up to do it. But unfortunately, if you got power, that's I mean everything comes down to the people. But if you got power and there's a way to enforce it, that's tough. It's just like you in the jungle. As it's very tough.
Yeah, like one of the things I say is like imagine North Korea. Some scientists in North Korea is the first one to make artificial general intelligence, and they put it to work making some super weapon that can basically kill everybody in the world at any point, like instantly, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. It's like if they can just kill all of us and we can't stop, it's like it's game over. Like
Yep,
they
that's it.
control us at that. Like we
Yep,
might as well be slaves at that point because either we're going to resist and die immediately, or we're going to serve them, right? Like and pick pick your option.
yep,
So really, force is the only thing that matters at the end of the day if you're dealing with someone who's willing to use it. Now, most of the
right,
time, again, most people aren't going to do that,
right,
but especially when you start to get into some of the worst elements of life, let's say like war or something. It's like, all right, well, if it's wartime, you have soldiers, enemy soldiers in your area, and they've just defeated you, and your women are at home. Guess what's about to happen?
absolutely,
It's not good, right? But like,
right,
if no one's there to stop them, no one's there to stop them, and that's just what it is. And that's how war. A lot of people think about war is like, oh, it's an honorable combat. It's on the battlefield, and like we're shooting at each other. It's like, yeah, but there's sexual assault. There's torture. There's you're just in some history. Sometimes you just kill all the boys and keep the women. Like there's brutal things that happen that is just a matter of power, and it's most of the time Machiavellans aren't it's not in their interest to be honest.
right,
So you can't trust them, right? So they'll try to look like normal people um, while they're still plotting those moves. And I think that's kind of what happened with Russia, right? So you have European nations like Germany, who's like, look, like we need energy, and having some pipelines with Russia makes sense, and they did that, thinking that maybe we're done with invasions and stuff, right? This I'm talking about pre Ukraine, but to be fair, they did take Crimea in 2014.
right,
Um, but they probably thought, oh, well, this isn't going to happen again, and Russia seems like they're modern, and they're not doing anything crazy, and all of a sudden boom, they move into Ukraine, and now you're like, I didn't expect that to happen. Now we did expect it to happen close to it, like when they moved
right.
all their
It was
tanks like right to the border, but
right,
like before that we didn't really see that coming, and then they're just like, wow, they're just going to take them. And to be to give the Ukrainians respect, most people thought Ukraine was done for. They thought they were going to be gone in a few days, kind of like how the Taliban took over Afghanistan.
yep.
But no, like they fought back. Um,
Still
but
fighting.
yeah, still fighting. Well, it's going to be harder now
Right,
with Trump about to cut their funds. Um, but yeah, like at any point in time, someone you thought was cool might just flip that on you, right? And you got to be at least try to be ready for it. So yeah, it's tough. And here's the thing too, right? A lot of people don't understand like how valuable it is to take land, right? So here's a global politics is like chess, except when you take a piece, it doesn't come off the board; it becomes your piece.
right. There's
That's what
no
it is. When I
right.
take your bishop, it's my bishop,
It's right,
right? And it's still a bishop; it's just my bishop now, right? And that the way that power snowballs can run real quick, and all of a sudden, if you let Machiavellian actors just start taking countries, right? Every country they take, they get more powerful. And if there's no resistance to them, and you're a Machiavellian, and you could just keep taking more countries. You keep taking, eventually you're so powerful nobody can stop you, right? And that was what we almost risked with Hitler and Nazi Germany. Now I'm not saying we're at that point right now, but the principle is the same in that if you have Machiavellian actors, especially large nations, um, like Russia or China or something like that, it's the same on the immoral basis if smaller countries do it, but it's less of a risk to the global system if Uganda does something crazy,
Right.
relative to Russia.
Right.
But yeah, when big actors start acting like Machiavellans and they just start taking stuff with military force, you can't ignore that because at the end of the day, if they're smart. So, for instance, let me get back to the point I was trying to make about how valuable it is to take land. Right? How much is a house worth? Like what, 200 grand, 300, like depending on the house.
Right.
Right?
Really
Like
expensive someone to pay for it, but yeah.
yeah, like hundreds of $1,000s. That's one house. How much is a neighborhood a house is worth?
Right.
Right? A lot of money. You're talking millions, depending on the neighborhood. How much is a city worth? A
Billions.
ton of money. How much is a
Yep.
whole country? And that's just the real estate, right? We just talking real
Billions.
estate. Now
Yep.
you got all the other assets. You got the natural resources. You got because if you could take the country, you could take their enterprises and nationalize them. So what's the value of all the companies in this place, right? Like there's so much value to stealing a country. And here's the thing, like the Machiavellian route, that the aggressive route is always the best route if you don't have morals, right? So like for instance, I could try to be as smart as Warren Buffett. I could try to run as many companies as Elon Musk, but if I could just rob them, well, then that's a lot easier.
Yep.
That's a lot easier way to go. So yeah, like it's always easier to take things if you have the force than it is to actually build it up. And that's why we need police to like keep the peace at the local level. And I think conservatives understand that well at the local level. But for some reason, when it's the national level, America First is like, oh, it's fine. Just let them. It's not our business. It's like
Right.
the world is our business, and I think that's when you let Machiavellans run free and just begin to grow because Russia was doing that. They would take portions of Ukraine and then force Ukrainians to fight other Ukrainians, and because basically that's how it works. Like a lot of even their own people don't want to fight and kill Ukrainians. One, because they got shared history, right? A lot of them are the same people. Um, but here's the thing: you don't have a choice, right? If you're a 20-year-old kid in Russia and you get drafted, it's like okay, you have to go out there. And then when you're on the battlefield, I mean, you don't really want to lose the battle, right? You don't want to die. And if you desert, your own people are going to kill you way faster than the enemy will. So it's like if you desert, you will die. If you don't desert, you might die. And now you're just in a situation where you don't really have a choice. And they do that with Ukrainians, right? So if I can come over, use my Machiavellian power to force you to kill your own people, and then use that to grow and take more nations, right? Like that's a recipe. That's a great. Here's the thing. That's a great business. That's a great strategy. If no one's going to resist you, right? Like if no one's going to resist you, you just keep taking and growing until you
And
get big enough to
to
take and grow
take
more
over.
people. Yeah, at some point, you need to either face resistance or you just get bigger than any potential resistance, and it's game over at that point.
What do you think is reasonable defense against a Machiavellian personality, or let's say someone who is damn near successful? Uh, like, what would be your defense system?
So the best defense is to not need to fight. That's the best defense. So what that looks like is encouraging everybody to stay in this civilization game, right? So if we can spread the culture such that it's not friendly to Machiavellian leaders, and so this would be like hypothetically if the Russian people were so opposed to the Machiavellian behavior that a leader like Putin wouldn't emerge, and you have just say like a regular European leader, still cares about the Russian people as any leader should, but isn't like out to just use military force to accomplish and change borders and grow power. Ideally that's the move. So I would say try to make it unfriendly to be unabashedly Machiavellian, to try to discourage that from even happening. But once it has happened, there's no option but strength. You're not going to argue with a Machiavellian, right? There's no, you're not going to guilt him. You're not going to shame him. You're not going to persuade him. You're going to beat him. That's the only, or you're going to lose to him. That's that's the only option, right? When someone is really doing that. And so, for instance, Ukraine, they can't really beat Russia without help, right? Like there's nothing they can do, right? So if
Right.
we're not going to help them, they just
It's
lose.
over. Yep.
Yeah, they just lose, and you got attacked by Machiavellian, and it's game over for you. That's life. Welcome to the jungle, unfortunately.
Yep.
Now, what do we do, right? As in the United States, do we let Putin do that? And my angle is this: bullies, including Machiavellans, they don't like to fight. They don't like to fight. Um, so fighting them is valuable even if you lose, right? If I walk up, to say it like you're in school and there's just a kid who wants to play. The bullies don't bully each other usually, right? It's not like the
Right.
big kids mess with the other big kid. Like they
Right.
mess with the weak kids is who they mess with, right?
Right.
So if I walk up to some kid I think is weak and I'm like, hey, I push him down, I laugh at him, give me your lunch money, and he cries and he gives me his money. It's like, all right, now this is how it works, right? This is a guy I can go to take his lunch money every day, right? Now, if I go to that same kid and he punches me in the mouth, and let's say I beat him up after that, right? But I'm gonna know like tomorrow I want to get punched in the mouth again. No, I'm gonna go mess with another kid. Is what I'm gonna do. I ain't gonna mess with him. I'm gonna mess with another one. So I think that even like resisting Russia, even if Russia wins in the long run in Ukraine, even if they do, the fact that we showed them that it's going to be costly, like we're going to make it costly for you to act this way, that is much better than nothing, right? Because if we do nothing, or almost nothing, like we did in 2014 when they went in and took Crimea, then that Machiavellian just goes, oh, well, they don't really care. I'll just take all of Ukraine, and then we'll see what other non-NATO countries we want to get to next, and what they even willing to fight and defend NATO. Now here's the thing: Article 5 calls us in, right? But if they smell weakness, if they smell America first, so it's not our business. We don't want to, because what if he starts a war with NATO, and then we fight Russia, now all of a sudden it's Cold War again. We might get the nuclear weapons, and if we're afraid of World War III, well then maybe we just don't defend, right? If he senses weakness like that, then he moves, right? And
Of
and that's
course.
the thing about a Machiavellian is, and here's the good thing about a Machiavellian. The good thing about the Machiavellian,
I
and
like in
and,
their
and
interests.
exact, they're predictable.
Yep.
They're entirely
Always.
predictable because you know where they're going. They're going
Yep.
towards their self interest,
Yep.
and if it doesn't make sense for them, they probably aren't going to do it, right?
Yep.
And here's the thing, right? And that, like I said, how valuable it is taking country. If Vladimir, imagine you're Vladimir Putin, right? And your objective, there's no morals that are going to impact you, right? You're just thinking about the well being of Russia in the long run. It's like if I can steal Ukraine back, and the West is going to get mad for about 3 years, but then I'll have a new country for the rest of time.
For the rest of the time, bigger,
That's a
stronger.
good deal.
That's a good
That's a
exchange.
great deal,
I'm gonna
right?
do it.
100%. That's a good deal to do, right?
I'm gonna do it.
Especially again because if we just get tired, of supporting them, we get tired of the money, we get tired. It's like
What's happening now?
exactly,
Exactly.
which is already happening, right? It's like so I got to go through 3 years of annoyance, and I get a whole country for it. Easy deal, easy 100%. If I don't have to go through any resistance, that's why haven't I did this yesterday?
Right.
Right? Or the opposite. If I lose customers, right? If the sanctions, if no one's willing to work with me ever in the future because I just did this, then is it really worth it? Maybe not, right? And that's where every country has an incentive to keep to make the You're not going to stop a Machiavellian from being a Machiavellian. That's impossible. But what you can do is make it not in their interest to
To-
behave like it, right?
right.
So if we, all commit not to buying Russian gas, if we found a way, imagine we found a way to stop China from buying Russian gas, right?
Now,
And it's like,
right.
so you got, some land in Ukraine, but now nobody's buying your product and you're starving out. That would have been a horrible decision for Putin in that case. Now we're not going to achieve that, but at least we resist it, right? And so I think that in terms of, that's a long way to kind of answer your question of what you do. There's not much you can do besides beat them. Try to encourage a culture such that outright and blatant Machiavellian behavior is not, accepted. Um, and at the end of the day, try to make it not in their interest to do what they are willing to do.
I I got an interesting flip on it, and I'm glad that I brought up capitalism. It's not to say that I'm taking this direction like personally, but it's just maybe for devil's advocate, it's interesting. So like you talked about how capital like we should stay playing this game. And this game, like in terms of like let's say like let's just take economic structures like capitalism, for example. To me, you have a system in place that incentivizes actors that would have like Machiavellian behavior type. So it's like it's competitive, it's strategic manipulation. It's like it's focused on results over means. That's all capitalism. And if we're engaging in this hypothetical of playing a game, should we be playing a game that disincentivizes that? And I'll go again. This is not to say like I'm uh, not a capitalist, but let's take socialism, for example, relative to capitalism and like how it could discourage Machiavellianism and creating those personality types. You got wealth and resources. It's not concentrated in the hands of a few. So now you're reducing opportunities for people or individuals to manipulate systems for personal gain because now wealth is something that's been distributed. And like now, instead of like centralized entities, now it's everything is a little bit more broad, and now you have to have cooperation amongst others, and it's just like that seems different. And it's not to say that like since we're playing this hypothetical game of not pretending like we're not in the jungle, should we be reason like to me like
Pretend like
intelligence
we're
is
not in
that
the jungle of capitalism.
right? Like let's say it's just like we're just creating a jungle. Could we create a more civil something that doesn't look like a jungle but looks like a civilization, and let's maintain that fairy tale?
So that's an interesting dynamic. So just to make sure I can summarize it and that I understand it properly. So what I'm saying is the real reality from the Machiavellian perspective is that we're in a jungle and Machiavellian rules win at at all points in the jungle. But we should try to act as if we're not in the jungle. Try to live this civilization game. Don't think
Right,
like that until we're forced to by another Machiavellian. And then you're drawing a parallelism and say, well, capitalism is kind of like Machiavellianism. So should we play a non-capitalistic game? Um,
right,
yeah, I
right,
mean, so here's what I'll say. I don't think capitalism is dangerous in a way that Machiavellianism is. So I don't think we really need to resist it. Um, but I do think it's an interesting angle. Um, I think the maybe the problem is, like I said, the same way that Machiavellianism always wins, right? If we're playing this game of rules and civilization and norms, and then someone has a gun to your head, then none of that stuff matters. Maybe likewise, if a capitalist has a good business and a good product, there may not be much to do that we can even do to stop it.
right. To me it's a that's why it's an interesting angle to me. It's just like it's like, and I'm not because I am a capitalist because I understand the realism of the world, and I think that's
It's
what
a
makes
practical thing. It's not that you
right.
want to be; it's just
I'm not
practical.
right, and I want to say that, and I want to say that because it's just like I think people are scared to say that, but like to me, if you're thinking about like to me, a 4-year-old could easily see what equality would look like if they were ruler of a planet. And like maybe not a 4-year-old, maybe like a 7-year-old. They would see like, hey, if we got resources and like this is something that it has to be shared amongst everybody, then maybe we should start breaking it down into equal parts. And to me, like your basic for basic reasoning, I think like even a 7-year-old could get it right in terms of distribution of resources. but he, I think human nature goes against that. And because human nature goes against that, and I understand human nature, I'm intrinsically a capitalist because I know that it creates the best incentives for people to go out and create value in the system. I don't think that it necessarily like I don't think that it is the most optimal. I think it's the most real. So like if we're playing this game of not living in the wild wild west, I wouldn't choose capitalism. And it's just like I wouldn't. I wouldn't choose capitalism if we're making up systems. And it's just like because capitalism is another made up system. I think I would choose something that disincentivizes those actions, uh, creates it makes it harder for even a Machiavellian personality or behavior to exist in a system where everything is distributed and wealth is shared and now like government isn't centralized. I mean it is, but it's just like it's seen as broader
Well,
and
here's the thing too. I feel like Machiavelli. I think you're right. Right. If you have a more egalitarian society where your individuals are have a similar amount of resources, and there isn't one strong man, leading the charge, I think you have a lot fewer Machiavelli. I don't think there's any group of people. Maybe there's some small group, but like especially you get like a large group, most people aren't Machiavellian. Most individuals, like we fit into the civilization game nicely. I think
I
we're
would say
designed to do that. Like we're social animals, right?
I
If
would
everybody
say
was Machiavellian, it'd be chaos out here, right? So
I
most
would say
people are not that way. Most people can play the civilization game by default, and they play it very well, and they don't even know they're in a jungle. They just think like everything is fine, right? So yeah,
but
I
the
do think
system
it.
though
Sorry.
I said but the system I would say is though just like you said like most people aren't like you're saying like aren't most people aren't Machiavellis, but the system incentivizes it though.
Yes, the system at the top, and then so here's another thing I say too is. Um, Leaders tend to be Machiavellian, and leaders tend to
Absolutely.
be psychopathic
Psychopath,
sometimes.
right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and the reason is because they're incentivized to be that way by the people, right? And so, for instance, populism is on a rise on the left and the right, and what's the critique of a populist? It's like, okay, well, you need to care more about us, not them, not the world, not anybody else. You need to care about us, right? It's all about me and what's in my interest. And if our leaders are, for instance, they'll say, why are we sending billions to Ukraine? We have problems at home, right?
Right.
Like that's basically saying, like, hey, you need to be more self interested. You
Right.
need to be, stop caring about the world and everybody else. So, like, we ask our people to really be like cold, like, hey, like, forget those guys. They're not
Right.
us, right?
Right.
Like, they're just not, right? And so like if you're a leader and you are doing good things for people that aren't your people probably gonna replace you with someone
Right.
who focuses on doing good things for them
Absolutely.
and someone who's cold and calculated and who's gonna bring you a new nation in tomorrow. That's probably who you want at the charge.
Yep.
So it's like even if the person isn't naturally a psychopath or think like a Machiavellian, just to do his job, he may have to think that way.
Right.
So yeah, that's something I say too. Is like in the book, like CEOs are the same way, right? The CEO, like if I'm the CEO of a company and I can build this factory, but it's going to mess up the city's water supply. The city's water supply is not my problem,
Right.
right? Like if I'm trying to maximize shareholder value, your kids drinking water in Flint, Michigan is not
It's not my
my
problem
problem,
at
right?
all.
The government need to clean that up. The government should have regulated me, right? Like they should have did something. But my job is not to take care of the community. My job is to take care of shareholders, right?
Absolutely.
And someone, if you have a leader who has a heart, who's like, man, those kids, if we build this factory and we dump this stuff, yeah, it's going to save us a bunch of money. But those kids might get diseases that might lower the lifespan of those children drinking this dirty water. And then you choose not to make that money, and it's clear, right? If it's clear that you chose to make significantly less money for the company, you might get fired,
You
right? And
talk what you're saying. My apologies for interrupting. What you're saying is dangerous because it's damn near what happened though. And it's like, and that's, but that's the scary thing that people don't want to talk about. Like there was a capitalist incentive to not upgrade the water. It cost money. Like you have to do so. And let's say, for instance, there was another company that it was like dropping waste or something in what would be the water supply. It's not my job to stop dumping waste. You should have made it so that it was illegal for me to dump waste in
right,
this lake. And that is exactly the system that we live in. People don't understand that. That is exactly
yeah, because
what
you
we
can't
live
trust
in.
companies to regulate themselves.
Right.
They have no incentive to do so.
Absolutely not. And that's to me that's dangerous. To me that is it's like it goes I'm not I don't want to sound like I'm being cynical, but embracing capitalism to me almost embraces cynicism. And it doesn't necessarily like it to me it doesn't have to be the case. And I think like even saying that, even going up, even potentially saying a hypothetical to capitalism would automatically just make you a socialist in a lot of people's eyes. And it's just like, no, but like just generally talking about capitalism and its effects on a society and how it doesn't, capitalism's incentive is to create the most for society by serving individuals. And it's not
By serving individuals. Yes.
right. And it's not doing so for societal's for the value of societal growth. That happens to be a byproduct. That happens to be a byproduct, and that's the danger to me. Where capitalism it creates value because it's self-interested, and the value is a byproduct of the self-interest, and that to me is dangerous. Like when you think about it, like when you really think about it, because it's just I'm no Marxist, and people like I'm just arguing. Again, I'm a capitalist. I'm just arguing a different perspective. But from a Marxist perspective, it seems as if there is more of a, and maybe it shouldn't be the case, but a moral or egalitarian. How would you
Egalitarian.
egalitarian? Thank you. Egalitarian perspective, and it seems to be, in that perspective, it seems to be what I would consider a more reasonable path, especially if we're talking about hypotheticals and staying in the fairy tale world. Like to me, that would be the most optimal.
Yeah. So I think the tough part is we're not in the fairy tale world, right? Like we're
Right.
not. Now for the Machiavellian piece, we need to act like it. On the capitalism side, I think capitalism is not as bad as Machiavellianism by a pretty big amount, but it still has these weaknesses, like we're talking about, right? Like we said, the water. If your city has bad water regulations, and I'm doing something in your city, and I can save money by messing up the water, that's that's your fault as the
Your
government
fault.
for not
Yep.
having regulated it. And I'm either going to, as a CEO, choose to make my shareholders a bunch of money, or I'm going to choose not to. And if I
Right.
choose not to, I'm probably going to get
You get
fired
replaced with
and
somebody
get
who will.
replaced by somebody who will give them their
Absolutely.
money. So it doesn't really matter what I do anyway, right? So yeah, I think that those realities of when the incentives of the company goes against the incentives of your society, that's when you need the government to come in and do their job and realign those interests, or make it illegal. So yeah, man, so my point was, the reason you see so many CEOs and leaders of companies that are this way, or psychopathic Machiavellian, is that being a normal person probably makes you worse at your job. Having a heart makes you bad at your job
Absolutely.
at that level, right?
Absolutely.
Someone who's just going to be like, hey, what's the rules? Who can stop me? Is it legal? Is legal? Then mess up the water.
Yep.
Like,
That's
and
it.
that's the person that's going to
That's
make
it.
you the money.
Yep. And that's where, like, to me, I think, like I think there may be a correlation where people who are highly intelligent have less connection to their emotion, or maybe not even necessarily that, or just more results oriented. And it's just like, and I think that can be seen as like a lot of people, and I'm a pretty nice guy, I would say, but like a lot of people in my family who are close to me, they think I'm cold. They're like, you are dismissive, you're cold. And it's like, I'm results oriented. I can remove all of that emotion, where I think a lot of people are just trying to feel the moment and I'm trying to solve the moment. Like, and that's a it's a different perspective, and I think that perspective is seen as code, and it's like because it's dismissive of the moment, like, you know what I mean, like it's dismissive of what's going on in this moment, where it's just like, I'm like, there's another reality where this shit is resolved, like, you know what I mean, like, I know I know what you're feeling right now is like pain and fear and all of this, but there is another reality where you not feeling that, and the sooner we get there,
The better.
right. And I think like, and I think I think maybe there's a higher correlation with people who are either educated or maybe more intellectual, where they are strictly results oriented, or they're able to maybe reduce their emotions to where they're now you're able to make more reasonable decisions, and you're not.
So here's what I'll say. I've seen some research on psychopathy, and which is different than Machiavellianism. Because Machiavellianism, the personality trait is a little different than like the. I was more talking about the philosophy of
Right.
Niccolo Machiavelli from his book The Prince. But anyway, similar direction here. Um, the research I saw on philosophy, basically they split psychopaths into two groups. Now you see a lot higher rate of psychopathy in prisons, right? So among which makes sense, right?
Right.
So among the prison population, there's a high rate of psychopathy. Prison population also tends to have lower IQ individuals.
That makes
Um,
sense.
so yeah, makes sense. So you may think, okay, well, does that mean that psychopaths are low IQ? And this is
No,
where it
not
comes back
always.
to yeah. So this is where it comes back to the research I saw, which is what they split psychopaths into two different types. There are the more impulsive psychopaths, and then sometimes there's sociopaths too. I'm not going to get into the weeds of the distinction between those two. But anyway, there's the more impulsive ones. Um, those tend to be more violent,
Right.
and those tend to be they end up in prisons. The other psychopaths, they're less impulsive. They still don't have the empathy. They're still cold and calculated and manipulative, but they don't really have that same impulsive nature. So they don't end up going to prison at nearly the rates as the other psychopaths. And so those psychopaths tend to be just in society, like they're just out there and they work
Leading
in
your
jobs
companies.
and leading your companies. Yeah, so like those might be the ones that, and maybe they have. I would guess that those psychopaths have higher intelligence on average than the other group of psychopaths. I don't know if they're over 100 IQ. I don't know if they're above the average, but I would suppose those are better than the other psychopaths at least.
I would imagine so. If I had to imagine, now you're just in general, like you really don't even have to be that reasonable. If you're self interested, you can get a lot of shit done. Like it's especially if you know that, like, you don't have to be reasonable. You don't have to make the most reasonable decision. You just have to align your interest and just move in that direction, and that can
Well, I
get.
think the moving it because almost everybody's self interested, right?
I wouldn't imagine so. And that, like, when I think about society, and I think about how many times, like we are self interested, but I think there are some things that, like firemen, like they're self-interested, like they're doing a job, but they know that the value or the compensation relative to the risk, to me, ain't worth it. I mean, like, you know what I mean, like it is if you're saving a community, and I get it, but I'm saying, like, just generally speaking, is $100,000, maybe $70,000 a year, whatever the average salary for a firefighter Is that worth the value of your life? And it's just like in most cases, I would say no. And I think like a lot of times, people like or where like you're saving someone from like a situation like let's say for instance somebody is about to get hit by a car and you can push them out the way. Do you push them out the way to prevent them from getting hit by a car, potentially putting yourself at risk? I think a lot of people do like would do something like that. So it's just like I do think there's a unique distinction where people aren't necessarily like they do go
The
against their
people who never
self-interest.
hold themselves back is what you're talking about. Like, if you
Right,
never hold yourself back, then that would
right,
just take you far
right,
by
right.
itself.
I think that would. I think it absolutely would. I think it could take you a lot further if you're just 100% self-interested. You knowing what the other person wants or what it is that is expected of you to get the result that you want. I think
Yeah,
it's dangerous.
because like following these rules and norms, there's a cost to that.
There is. That's
There's
my
a
point.
cost.
That's my
Yeah,
point.
there's a
Yep.
cost. When you stop following that stuff, it's like, hey, I'm
Yep.
just going to just move.
Do it. Yep.
I'm getting it done. Whatever I don't care. I was supposed to do it. I don't care about even how anybody judging me. I'm gonna just get it done. How I'm gonna get it done. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
there's certainly value to that. Now, you may pay a social cost, uh,
Absolutely.
but otherwise, yeah, you just get rid of all those blocks.
It's dangerous, man. It's again, I am a capitalist, and I think I will always be until inevitably AI comes in. Hopefully, it just replaces traditional jobs, and we have different jobs. But I don't. It wouldn't be my ideal system, especially even thinking about it in this context. Like when I think about Machiavelli, and I thought about everything, I was like the parallels for capitalism is a little scary. And it's not to say that like again, there are good things about capitalism because we are living in the wild wild west, and it creates the best conditions for the reality of the situation. Now we can make the best conditions, we can make our conditions better, but I think it would, and this maybe is I guess where a little cynicism comes in. It would require going against your self-interest in favor of the collective, which I think civilization, if I'm being honest, I think it pushes people towards it. Um, I think civilization pushes people towards it, but I think it's a constant fight against
I
our
mean,
nature.
when I mean, there's duality. So we're a social animal, and there's a strong collective nature,
Right,
but collective for whom?
right,
Right? So collective, for we over here, this is my land, you over there is your land. We collected within the scope of our respective areas. But when we interact with each other, oftentimes it's bloodshed, right?
right,
So I think having a communal nature, right? So even conservatives, right, who tend to be more like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, stand on your own, small government, like they're still socialists in the household, right? Like
right,
they're not making you pay when you take something out the cookie jar, right?
right,
Like it's like and they're still pro socialism at the church. They want
right,
communities coming together and helping each other out.
right.
It's just that when it gets to the government, then they don't want to do it, right?
It's
But there's
inconsistent. That's inconsistent. It's just like if you go to the dinner plate and dad's like anybody who bought the mashed potatoes can eat the mashed potatoes. It's like, well, damn. Like you know what I mean? Like
right.
it's like, but dad is gonna like everybody. It's instinctive, and that's where it's just like you know what the moral and you know what the optimal solution is for a group, and we choose to go against it in favor of the individual.
Yeah, because often we are the individual, and so I had an interesting thought. Um, so you mentioned, and this goes back to what I said, is like humans are designed not to be Machiavellian. Like the average person is designed to fit into the norms and move. And unfortunately, because the norms sometimes are horrible, right? So the norm might be you in Nazi Germany,
Right,
and they gonna fit right in with that norm. That's
right,
exactly what they do. Or the norm might be, you're in some extreme Islamic country and you got to kill the gay person next door. Boom. Or you're here and it's a lot easier and not a lot nicer in the modern Western civilization to fit in with the norm. But anyway, I think humans are designed to kind of just socialize and do whatever everybody's doing and kind of just follow the norms and the system and the structure. Um, but you still have the capability for leaders to emerge that act like Machiavellians. And I wonder if that's by design, man. Like, I wonder, not necessarily by design, but by like, it's just how it works. Like, the average person is designed to fit in and be led by people who are brutal like that. Or a similar, and I'll let you respond real quick, but another similar idea I had was like, why don't people get more intelligent? Right. It's like, you know, um, imagine you had a society where like everybody was in the top 5%, right, in terms of intelligence. It's like, would that society, like, what would happen in that society where there's no dumb people? Like who's working at McDonald's, right? Like, who's going to do the stuff that you need to get done? That's kind of menial, you know. Like, would nobody really want to do that work? Like, do you need a distribution of low intelligence people just to keep society moving? Like it's so, like, I'm not trying to get like super negative here, but that's the type of thing. Like, do we need non-Machiavellians and Machiavellians? Do we need lower intelligence people? Will there be some issue if people got more intelligent? Like, I don't know.
I think I think like I don't know if it's the case that people, and I guess maybe I keep saying this, but maybe maybe I don't know if it's the case that people aren't Machiavellian by nature, because
I
it's
don't
like
think they are. I think
it's
we play the civilization game well, man. People don't
we
even know
do
they're in a civilization game. They
we
don't even
do.
know.
I mean, you're right, but it's just like you said, with it like I'm breaking it down to like I'm talking about like I'm breaking it all the way down to free will. Like I don't believe people are free, and I believe that humans largely are a byproduct of their system. And if the system is negative, I think you'll likely create byproducts of that. And I think like and I think there was an experiment that I was trying to think about. I think it was like the prison guard experiment or something.
Well, yeah, but to me,
Uh,
I think that's what makes them non-Machiavellian is that they're going to do whatever the system is, and that's why I brought up Nazi Germany. Because if the norm of the system is we're killing Jews tomorrow, then people are
then
going to
we're
go kill
killing.
Jews tomorrow. That's what they're going to
Right.
go do, right? But they're not Machiavellian. They're still playing the game that everybody else is
I
playing.
see what you're saying.
The
I see what
Machiavellian
you're
says,
saying.
"I don't care about this game.
I
I'm
see
my
what you're
own
saying.
person." Yeah,
Uh, I see what you're saying. But to me, I think it's maybe I'm saying it's natural for people to take that role because self-interest is the most natural state. Like maybe I'm saying that. Like maybe I'm saying like people would prefer that role relative to, or maybe instinctively take that role relative to the alternative. And the alternative is what takes like is damn near to me what I would almost calculate as intelligence, the ability to go against the system.
well, I feel
Uh,
like you're trying to like think of like an anti-Machiavellian because, like, for instance, like Machiavellian on one side is like, I'm gonna break out of this system that everybody's doing and just think about the power structures within it and what I can do to serve myself on a cold, amoral basis. And then you have the vast majority of people who are stuck in the system. And if it's a good system, then they're going to be good. If it's a bad system, they're going to be horrible, right? Like, it just depends on what kind of society you're in. And then I think what you're thinking about is like somebody who's outside of the system, like a Machiavellian, but actually still cares. And that's like the opposite of a Machiavellian.
right, but it is. But I'm saying like I'm also like I guess I'm saying like is it? I think I'm pointing out that I disagree. That I think people may be naturally Machiavellian.
I don't think so, man.
I mean, and
I really don't.
that's the wild west. And I think like that's exactly like to me that's exactly why capitalism works. Like you're literally talking about the self interest of the individual, and that's why we have a system built around it. And it's just like, and that system works because of the nature of humans. And if self-interest is our nature, I mean, that's what Machiavellian was preaching. Because before Machiavelli, politics was seen as a substrate of morals. Like it was Aristotle. It was like, and like
Right.
politics was like a like a subset of morals. And then Machiavelli came and was like, it's its own entity. It's its own thing. And I think people, maybe we're not necessarily naturally that, but I think we have a natural inclination. I think it feels better than the alternative,
I
or
think
at
the
least it's
fact
an
that we're
easier set to get
socialized,
to.
I think the fact that we're socialized and that we're social by default is what makes us non-Machiavellian. Like humans are great at fitting any kind of form. Like whatever mold is currently going on in society, that's what we do, right? Like we can be, you put us in a Spartan training camp, and like we're gonna be soldiers coming out of that. You put us in, a slave mentality, we're gonna have a slave mentality. You put us in a
Yep.
brutal, you know, uh, type of culture where we conquer and raid, and we're gonna be raiders and conquerors and that like that the normal human is capable of so much on the good and the bad. We're capable of all of that, right? Like if I take a kid and I say, "Hey, I'm gonna raise you in a society, your dad, your brother, like what y'all do is y'all go village to village, slaughter the men, rape the women." That's what they gonna do. That's what they like, and that's just gonna be life. That's normal for them, right? And so to me, that's what it may seem Machiavellian because it's brutal, but it's not Machiavellian because they're just still following the norms of society. They just live in a brutal society. Um, but at least most of us now, we don't live in a brutal society, so the Machiavellans are easier to spot because they're the brutal ones. But if you live in a brutal society, that still doesn't mean you're Machiavellian. That just means that you're a normal person in this game
In this
of
brutal
brutality.
system.
Yes, which is why having a good culture is a big deal. And that's where you go back to Jordan Peterson, right? Because Jordan Peterson is like, I think he understands that, and he thinks that religion keeps us from ending up in
And
cultures where the norm is brutality like that, because we really can be. I think he understands that humans can be very brutal, and because one of the biggest things that he studied was the Holocaust and like how that happened, and how the German people ended up in that place. Um, so yeah, I think that to me, people are not Machiavellian. They don't know we're in the jungle. People are going to do whatever the norm is. They're going to believe whatever the religion is. Like that's what the average person is designed to do. And then you have these rare people that don't care about whatever your norms are. They just don't care, and their sole angle is what can I get out of it, and I'm not going to get distracted by whatever people think is a natural thing.
I think I agree with you. Like I agree with you that like that people are, maybe what I'm saying is, I think, I mean, let's take history. I mean, like you said as an example that we're not uh like Machiavellian is that we play the civilization game relatively well. But the civilization games in terms of human history, we ain't been playing it that long. Like, you know what I mean, relative to the scale of, or at least the origin of humans on the timeline. It's just like I would say civilization, humanity is probably 230,000 to 300,000 years old. Civilization as we know it is maybe 1,000 years old. Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
less
Like
than that,
less
as
than
we
that,
know it. Yeah,
as we know it. And like for the majority of humanity, I think if we went back, I think we would see the like we stealing apples and we not sharing. Like I think you would see, and maybe I'm not saying, maybe it's not to
well,
say
I think
that.
I think the confusion is I'm using the term civilization. I think when you hear civilization, you think like good civilization. Where like I just mean civilization, period, which is more of like I'm more talking about conformity. to whatever the current status quo is. And
Right.
humans are designed to conform, if it's good or bad. Conformity. We're designed to conform, and the Machiavellian does not conform.
But I think the to me the easiest state, especially given human history, may be non-conform, like not necessarily conformity. It may be the Machiavellian state, is
It
what
may
I'm
be
saying.
brutal, but
Right.
to me, they're still not Machiavellian because they're playing the civilization game. It's just a brutal civilization. So I think it's a tough way to kind of split that hair there.
Because I would say civilization to me is, it goes against the nature. It goes against human nature. Like that's what I would say with civilization. I would almost say the same thing with intelligence. Like civilization goes against human nature, and to me, it's a marvel that we got here, and we're actively trying to sustain it. But I think the easiest state, and this is what I mean, like I don't think that we're naturally Machiavellian, but I think the easiest state to obtain is Machiavellian relative to the alternative. Like, and that's where I think it's and that's why I think we have history. I mean, like
So
I
let
think
me draw this thing. So imagine you're in a civilization that it is brutal. It's a brutal civilization. You're
yep,
civilization you're in conquers and rapes women from the villages they conquer. Okay,
yep,
but there's a norm in a civilization that says um, you you have to murder any woman that has a child already. So you only take the young ones that haven't given birth. Okay, so that's the norm. Now it's brutal. That's very brutal, and one may call that Machiavellian. But to me, the Machiavellian in that society, if he goes to this new village and he finds a woman who has a child, but she's beautiful, like he really wants her sexually, it's like, nah, I'm gonna keep her. Right, like that's the Machiavellian, right? Like the non Machiavellian is going to be like, hey, we're not supposed to, keep those. I know she's attractive, but the rule is, we murder those and then we rape the other ones, right? Like that, it's all brutal. But like the Machiavellian is willing to toss out whatever norms they do have, as
I,
long as it suits his interest.
I get you. Like maybe I'm talking about like altruism, like in terms of self interest, and it's just like I think that to me I think the base state is self interest relative to something like altruism.
Yes,
That
but it's
is
self interest within the group though. Like humans do not stand on our own. We do. People like you and me do, but
right,
humans generally do not. Humans are group animals, man. Like you see an angry mob, that's humans, right? Like
right,
that's what we do. We're not the ones outside of the mob looking at them like damn, that makes me nervous. That like we exist, but we're the rare ones that are willing to like step out of whatever's popular right now and be kind of free spirits. Now the Machiavellian is a free spirit in that way, but then goes pure like power and amoral, right? But like we're that, but we're not, amoral, but we're
right.
still not conforming to the group. But to me, like every human, every from forever since the beginning of time, humans will blend in to whatever society they're in. Like let's say you're a Christian. Okay, I'm gonna drop you some Native American tribe 2,000 years ago. You're gonna believe whatever religion they believe at that
Yep,
time. Like
yep.
that's just humans are designed to, whatever their back, practices are. Like, oh well, on 2 days out of the week, you got to go rub the trees to please the tree. Got like that's what you're gonna be doing. If that's what they did, that's what you're gonna be doing if you over there. And that's what I'm saying. Humans conform. That we're social creatures, and that's a strength, right? Our social nature is a strength that protects us, but it also can make us stupid, especially in groups.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Like to me, I think like when I think of altruism, I think of it being like, especially like from a evolutionary perspective, it goes against evolution, and that's why to me, like in Machiavelli, a Machiavellian, just in terms of from an evolutionary standpoint of existing, I think it wins. Like you know what I mean? Like when if you see something you want it, you take it relative to
I don't
someone
think
else
so, man. I
who's
don't think
thinking
so.
I think they win.
I think fitting in wins.
I think it's like it's
If
survival of the
you, if, for
fittest.
instance, if you put me in Puritan, America, right? And I'm like, hey, y'all, I think this witch hunt shit is stupid because they're gonna be like, you a goddamn witch. They're gonna kill me, right? Like I'm
Right.
not going to last, right? Well, I will last if I'm playing that game with them and I just blend in like a member of the crowd and hope nobody has a dream that I'm a witch. Like that's
I
the
don't
best way to survive. Being a lone wolf will get you killed.
I don't disagree with you. I'm saying because I agree that humans conform. I'm saying to me, I think base level without any variables to conform to. I think there are like so let's say for instance like we take the example that humans can conform. I think there are easier systems to conform to or easier ideals to conform to or states for you to exist in relative
True.
to others.
Yes.
And I think
I talk about that in my book
altruism,
too. I have a book called Societal Context where I discuss what normal can be, because normal can be
right,
a wide variety of things, but there's certain
right,
things that it cannot be. Yes,
right,
and say altruism is one of those.
right, exactly. That's my point. That's my exact point. And I think like at base level, I don't think that altruism is an instinctive state.
No, it's not. No, it's
And
not in your interest to be altruistic.
right. And that's my point. That's almost my whole point. That is almost my whole point about the nature of humans. And
But if it is, it's within the in group, where there's long run reciprocal benefits of out. Like for instance,
right,
like I think like
right,
certain monkeys will like groom each other. Like I'll pick the bugs off your back because I know
right,
you'll pick the bugs off my back, and that
right,
makes like everybody better off.
right.
Versus being somebody who never helps and nobody helps you and then you're screwed. So I think there's a reciprocal altruism that can be useful in like
Beneficial.
in the in group, yes.
I
But
agree with that.
generally, yes, being too altruistic is not going to help you. Yeah,
And that's my I guess that's what I was just pointing out. Like in the nature of humans and that like civilization to me like altruism is a just like you said it's sacred. I like that term. It is sacred.
yes,
It is sacred. And I don't think that we I don't think that it's something that you are born with. Like, and that's where it's just like to me, the easiest state is to get what you want when you want it by any means. That's the easiest state.
right. That's the
And
most natural, right? That's
right,
when you're a baby.
right,
You don't got morals. You're just trying to get food and live. And
right,
at a really fundamental level,
right,
that's all of us.
right. And then, like to me, so that's where it's like it doesn't make me cynical, but it makes me appreciate society because I think there is likely an alternative. And like again, we're still fighting for it in every sense of the word. Like we're still fighting for it. Civilization isn't something that's guaranteed, and I think that's something that we're taking for granted even in this moment. But not us in particular.
Right.
but
Yeah. But the bigger picture. Yeah.
right. But it's just it calls us for a moment of reflection, needs to understand the sanctity of civilization and altruism,
Yeah, and
and to
it's the duality, right? You need to keep playing the civilization game because it is sacred, but you got to keep
right,
your eye on the jungle, though.
you do,
Keep your eye
you
on the
do,
ball when you got people moving in the jungle.
you do, absolutely,